So when I, quote-unquote, came out as a giant Eurocrime fan circa 2004, I found there were really three ways that other people my age had discovered the genre. Three gateways in. The first was the music. Some people discovered the actual movies themselves after first having bought some soundtrack compilations on CD, because there were some really cracking CD soundtrack compilations available, even when very few of these movies were available on DVD at the time. Beretta 70, that was the big one on CD from 1998. So many people had that one. Even some normies had that one. There was also Piombo Rovente from 2000. That one was tougher to find, but I think it was on vinyl too. There was Roma Violenta, which was a compilation CD, even though there's a film by that name too. And I think the next one I noticed was called Poliziotteschi Graffiti from around 2005. So the point is, people said, holy shit, are these some tough motherfucking funk grooves? I wonder if the films themselves are just as great. Fortunately, they were. And now the second gateway into the Eurocrime genre occurred when the horror crowd, the horror fans, rewound in time to see what their favorite sicko directors had been doing in the 1970s. Ruggero Deodato, for instance. Before he made Cannibal Holocaust and Cut and Run in the early 80s, he made a Eurocrime film called Live Like a Cop, Die Like a Man back in the 70s. Similar thing with Antonio Margheriti. Before he made Cannibal Apocalypse in 1980, he made crime films in the 70s like Death Rage and The Squeeze. And director Umberto Lenzi, he was probably the prime example. Before he made 80s movies like Make Them Die Slowly or Nightmare City, he spent the whole second half of the 1970s just cranking out Eurocrime movies, like 2 or 3 a year. Now this director here, Sergio Martino, the director of Silent Action, he made a pretty early entry into the cannibal horror subgenre with Slave of the Cannibal God from 1978. It's not one of the really extreme ones, unless you count all the real-life animal cruelty that is a very, very unfortunate feature of the subgenre. I mean, really lame sicko shit. And now the third way that a guy my age in the 1990s and the early 2000s typically discovered the Eurocrime genre was to come from a place of spaghetti western fandom and then look chronologically beyond it. That is, to follow the tough guy stars of the Italian westerns, Franco Nero, Antonio Sabato, Lee Van Cleef, those kinds of guys, and see what they were doing chronologically afterwards. And this was the route I took. I was a big fan of spaghetti westerns around age 16, 17, 18, and they were my gateway into Eurocrime. But now, that path would not have worked so well with the star of this movie, French actor Luc Miranda, because he only starred in a single spaghetti western, a movie titled They Still Call Me Amen, before the Eurocrime fad really took off. Oh, and he was a member of the Bandit Gang in Red Sun, a Charles Bronson spaghetti western, but that was a really small part. Our other big name here in silent action, Tomas Milian, was a huge star of spaghetti westerns, but here he's more of a guest star, just popping up for a few scenes. We haven't seen him yet, but he has more of a small desk-bound role here. Tomas was an A-list star of this genre, the Eurocrime genre, and he was going to be an even bigger superstar in the next year after Silent Action, starting to play his famous Nico Giraldi cop character in Cop in Blue Jeans and all its sequels. But maybe because he played both heroes and villains in Eurocrime movies, he was willing to take the occasional small roles in them. It's sort of like the thing that Klaus Kinski based half his spaghetti western career on, the idea that he was the biggest name in the whole movie, but he's only in the picture for a handful of scenes. You saw that a lot also in B-movies in the VHS era. You know, the old expression of, he was on set just long enough to make it onto the poster. But you don't see it a lot in mainstream cinema. The most recent example I can think of was a Kurt Russell movie called Executive Decision from the 1990s. Remember how Steven Seagal, who was still a big, relevant action star in his own right, remember how he took a small role in this Kurt Russell movie, Executive Decision, and then he disappeared in the first act of the film? You don't see that sort of thing very often. But the point is, I did know Tomas Milian, and I could have followed him over from the spaghettis to Eurocrime, as I already knew him from co-starring with Lee Van Cleef in the Italian western The Big Gun Down. When I say that I followed the tough guy stars into Eurocrime, that is true. But here's the thing, I fell in love with the genre before I knew it was a genre. And in the mid-1990s, I just thought I was buying or renting a bunch of random Italian-made crime films, starring guys like Lee Van Cleef, Charles Bronson, Jack Palance, Telly Savalas. I hadn't yet put it together in my head that this was its own genre. And even though I was a huge spaghetti western fan, I never really questioned what came after the westerns over in Italy. But obviously something must have though, right? Because the Italians, they were very fad-oriented, right? Well, I soon found out that all the crime movies I had seen and loved, which I just figured were random cop and gangster movies, they were all part of this Italian cinematic movement, and that movement was the replacement action fad for the spaghetti western.
Well, I'll be darned.
Now, in this hallway, our hero just passed some posters tacked up on the exterior.